I'm excited about the spring display that we are getting started here. You may recognize this area. We've replaced our keyhole garden and also our concrete bench that we had here and our pallet garden with a new display. And you can see behind me we've got some different baskets that we've created. So really our idea here was to create different color combinations and container recipes for you guys to get different ideas. So it's a very colorful display and I'm very excited. So I wanted to kind of go through how we've developed our container designs here and also how we went about building these. So you can see we've got ours on just kind of alternating heights anywhere from about 3 to 4.5 feet. And we wanted it something so that when you fill it up, usually the plant you put in here is going to be about 2 to 2.5 times the actual depth of your container. So we've got some different heights here. This is one of the shorter ones that we're doing. And so what we've done here is we've just put them on a 4x4 post. We've got them anchored on there. And then we actually drilled into a kind of a piece of wood here to give it more of a solid base. And then we've got our cocoa fiber baskets that we've put in here. Make sure that if you're hooking them up to irrigation, you've ran your irrigation cord up through that so that we're ready to go. And we're gonna eventually come back and staple these to the post so you don't see that either. We just want to make sure we left plenty of line in the meantime so that we can get our irrigation exactly set where we want to. So we have excess right now at this point. So the containers that we're using today have not only holes on the side, obviously you can see we can put a lot of different trailing plants here, but we're going to be able to put a lot inside here. These are about 16 inches in diameter, so we got a lot of plants to fill in here. Now you probably have heard with containers, you want to think about a thriller, a filler, and then a spiller. So what we're going to do next is go ahead and fill this with some good potting soil that we have here. Then we'll put some slow release fertilizer in here so that we've got plenty of nutrients to feed all of these plants because we are kind of packing a few in here, but it's going to really take off once they get settled in. So you'll notice that when I filled this with soil, I didn't fill it completely full, and that's because we've got to plant the sides before we actually go all in with all of our soil. And we're going to be packing a lot of root balls in here. So once we get all of our plants in here, then we'll go in and make sure that we've filled in the areas between the root balls with some additional soil. So of course I didn't want to fill it completely full, so we've got that. Now we can shift down here and take a look at the plants that we're going to fill this container with. So when we were looking at which plants, I really was just kind of, paying attention to some different colors that I personally liked. And I was really drawn to this petunia that kind of has a sort of a lighter red, almost pink stripe to it, but then the throat of it has a real deep purple to it. And I was also drawn to this almost black looking petunia and putting those together. So that sort of brought me to looking at a kind of purple, deep black almost, and to kind of a burgundy color combination. So as we were going through the nursery, we started looking at some other plants to go with it, keeping in mind whether we were going to use, what we were going to use for a thriller, a spiller, and then also a filler. So we came across these real deep purple salvias, and then also this kind of dark red that's got the deep green veins to it. This is a polka dot plant. And then of course our purple fountain grass, which is a great thriller to put in any container. So we've got that here in the front, or right in the center of our container. And we were thinking about what we wanted to put as a spiller to kind of go along the edges. So we've got some of these petunias that we're going to put along the edges, but then we also want a little bit of green. And if you look at all of this green, it's really got a kind of a deeper color to it. And I thought this wire vine would be a nice combination with that. And if you look at the stems, it picks up on that dark purple on the stems as well. So I thought that would be a great combination to just add a little bit of greenery. So that's going to go along the edges here. So when we're planting a container like this, like I said, we don't want to put all of our potting soil in here so that we can make sure that we have space to get these in. And it's really best to go ahead and plant your sides first before you go in with the center stuff. So we're going to start by putting this wire vine in around the edges. So when you're planting the sides here, it's really a matter of just kind of pushing those through the hole. It's not too big of a deal there. It can be more tricky if you're using larger plants, but that cocoa fiber is really gonna help hold that soil in there. And so you can see they're just gonna rest in there. We've got 4 of these wire vines to plant around here, so we're gonna just space them out so that we can have kind of that different color and texture as you go around the basket. And then we're also gonna put the petunias around on the edges as well, hanging. So now you can see we have all of our plants planted on the side, so it's time to go ahead and fill the center up. And I think because we have some smaller plants to put in here, we're gonna go ahead and put a little bit more soil in here. And that way we also have some covering the root balls of all of these on their sides too. Again, I say soil, but this is really potting soil. You want to make sure that you're not using topsoil in containers like this because it doesn't provide adequate drainage. So we're just going to put a little bit more in there on the sides and mound it up in the center for our container that we're putting here in the center. And at this point, I like to work from the center out. So we have this purple fountain grass. We only bought one because we only need one as the center focal point. It's a smaller container, which is nice to put in here, but it definitely will get larger and be that thriller aspect that we want in our container here. And that's something to keep in mind when you're out buying plants. Think about where it's going to go in your container so you can kind of know whether I need one of those or whether you need maybe 3. So we bought 3 of the others. So we've got our salvias here. So I'm just going to kind of show where those are going to be. And because they're dark purple, I'm going to try to space those so that they're over above the red color. And I'm going to put that one up front because it's a little showier than this other one that's kind of past its bloom at the current time. And then we're going to fill in with our dark burgundy polka dot plant here in between those. So I'm kind of just placing them in here to check their height. And I think we're good with the amount of potting soil that we have in here. And so at this point we can start planting them. Again, if you had a larger 1 gallon or something like that, you might be limited on how many plants you could put in here. But I think this looks good. And of course they're gonna fill in and even just fill out even more. So I'm excited about how these are gonna look. Now, when we were doing this, while I'm talking right now a lot about the colors and the combinations that we're putting together, when you're putting a container together, probably the most important thing really to keep in mind when you're selecting plants is to make sure that those plants want the same environment because you're planting them together. So of course here with all of our containers, we are in bright full sun, so we wanted to make sure we've got plants that can handle full sun and also the same water regime as well. So while you could do a vegetable container, you could do a succulent container, keep in mind that you can't do succulents next to water-loving plants because I always say one of those are likely going to do well and one is probably going to fail. So depending on how much water you actually provide it with. So all of these plants that we've selected for each of our containers do well together. And we were kind of limited because all of these containers are actually going to be on the same drip system. So we wanted to make sure that all 9 of our containers are going to enjoy the same amount of water that they're going to get throughout the season as well. So, and again, they're all in full sun here. So if you notice, when I'm taking these out of the containers, I'm sort of teasing those roots a little bit, but I'm not even really planting them because we're going to have to come back in and put more soil around these. So I've just got them placed on top of the soil here. And the other thing is when we fill this back in, we want to make sure that we're putting the soil just slightly below our edge so that when we do water this, we don't have a whole bunch of potting soil that's going to run over the edge of this. So at this point, I think we can go ahead and add some more soil in and around each one of these. So once we have them all nice and tucked in with potting soil, again, make sure that there aren't any gaps, especially around those root balls, because that can really cause them to dry out quickly. Of course, we're gonna water these in really well and be mindful, especially in these first few days as they're just getting established. But these are gonna take off pretty quickly. We'll wanna make sure that we're giving them some fertilizer. We did put a slow release in here, so there'll constantly be a supply of it. But again, we've got a lot of plants packed in this small area, so they are going to need frequent irrigation as well as some nutrients. But I think you can see the color combinations are going to work really well together. And again, we picked plants that like the same environment, so that's always critical when you're making a container. And we'll see how the rest of them turned out. If you look at the whole scope of what we planted 9 containers here. And we've got some that are kind of the yellows, lemons, citrus colors, I call them. And then we've gone to like a peach color, and we also have some hot pinks. And one thing that we've tried to include also in all of these containers, if you look, is there's always some foliage that adds some color to it too. So that's kind of a critical component or a trick that I always feel like is important, because even when you don't have plants that might be blooming all season long, you're gonna have that foliage that's gonna give you that pop of color as you continue through the season. So this is just a fun display, and we'll check back in again with it later on as they fill out. We hope you enjoyed this video as part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on the OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.